An important part of what made Superman one of the greatest is the fact that he was the sole survivor of his planet. His home Krypton burned down and he supposedly lost everyone he had ever known, but despite that, Superman remained kind, generous and cheerful. He did not set about on a path of destruction fueled by grief, but chose to use his powers for the betterment of the new planet he now called home. As is obvious, with lore expansion, soon readers were introduced to new characters who had survived the destruction of Krypton, denying Superman his title of the last Kryptonian alive. I'm going to tell you about most of these characters, but before that, a wee warning. As most of these characters have many versions, I've just chosen the continuity and storyline that are the most relevant or interesting subjectively. So that being said, let's begin. Superman, or Kal-El, or Clark Kent. The first obvious survivor is Superman, of course. Superman was born Kal-El to the scientists Jor-El and Lara Lorvan in Krypton. As soon as they found out their planet was about to be destroyed, Jor-El and Lara researched the habitable worlds near them and built a rocket for their infant son to travel in. Kal-El's rocket landed in Smallville, Kansas, where a happy farming couple, Jonathan and Martha Kent, adopted him. They named him Clark, and he soon began developing supernatural abilities like super strength, flight, X-ray vision, and the ability to produce heat vision from his eyes because of Earth's yellow sun. You see, Kryptonians don't have any powers on their planet as it orbits a red sun. The Kents lovingly taught him how to hone his skills, to hide it from the prying eyes of the world and use his powers for good. The rest, as they say, is history. Kirk Allen, Christopher Reeve, Henry Cavill and David Corenswet are some of the actors lucky enough to have worn the cape of the Man of Steel. Supergirl, or Kara Zor-El. Soon after Kal-El is sent to Earth, his 16-year-old cousin, Kara Zor-El, too is sent to Earth by her father, Zor-El, Jor-El's brother. Unfortunately, Kara's spaceship gets stuck in a large kryptonite meteorite and she's held in a state of suspended animation while her cousin finishes his childhood. By the time the 16-year-old reaches Earth, Kal-El is all grown up and she looks younger than him. Just like her cousin, she decides to use her powers for good and adopts the alter ego Supergirl. Supergirl's story has been retconned a lot of times since her creation. Just take her name for example. She went from being Linda Lee to Kara Danvers, Danvers being the name of her adopted family. She was also Kara Kent and Linda Lang for a while, but we don't have time to get into that. Her Earth 2 version called Power Girl was created by writer Otto Binder and illustrator Al Plastino for the 252nd issue of Action Comics that was published in 1959. Her first live action appearance was in 1984 with Helen Slater playing Supergirl. In James Gunn's DCU, Millie Alcock has been cast to play the cousin of Kal-El. Krypto the Superdog. From different origins to different species, Superman creators cannot figure out the lore for Krypto the Superdog. This man's, Kryptonians' best friend first appeared in the 210th issue of Adventure Comics in 1955, created by Otto Binder, Kurt Swan, and Cy Barry. In his original story, Krypto was the house pet of Kal-El on Krypton. Jor-El, while testing out prototypes of the rocket that would eventually send his son to Earth, decided to use Krypto as his test subject after putting him in cryogenic sleep. Krypto's rocket got knocked off course by meteorites and landed on Earth years later. He was reunited with Kal-El, who was now the teenage superhero, Superboy. Through his human-level intelligence and acute sense of smell and hearing, Krypto helped Superboy in his adventures. There have been many versions of Krypto, including one where he was born powerless and later developed powers after being exposed to the sun's radiation, and one where he's a dog in an idealized version of Krypton created as a trap by Brainiac 13. Krypto made his live-action cinematic debut in the 2025 film Superman, but appeared on television series like Smallville, Titans, and Krypto the Superdog before. He was even voiced by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in the 2022 animated flick DC League of Super Pets. Beppo the Super Monkey. The Simian of Steel, Beppo was one of Jor-El's test animals in Krypton. The smart monkey escaped onto Earth after his planet was destroyed by sneaking into Kal-El's rocket. When they landed on Earth, Beppo hopped off and spent some months on his own. During this time, thanks to Earth's environment and the sun, he developed abilities like Superman. Once he saw Kal-El, Beppo flew back to Smallville and created havoc by setting off fireworks in the Kent garage. He was so startled by his own antics that he flew off to space but returned eventually. When Supergirl encountered Beppo, she introduced him to Krypto and Streaky, the Super Cat, and the monkey decided to use his powers for good by joining the Legion of Super Pets. Beppo's first appearance was in the 76th issue of Superboy in 1959, and he was created by George Papp and Otto Binder. It's really a pity we have not got to see so much of Beppo in the movies. You can read some of his adventures in the 2024 one-shot Az-Rel special, the 2008 miniseries Final Crisis Legion of Three Worlds, and the 2005 storyline Infinite Crisis. Kandorians. Imagine you think you are the last of your species, the only evidence of a planet ever existing, and then you realise you are not the last one. A whole city of your now destroyed planet is alive and well. Whatever you feel right now is probably not even close to what Superman felt when he found out about the bottle city of Kandor. The supervillain Brainiac went around the universe shrinking cities and storing them in glass bell jars. One of the cities he had stolen was the city of Kandor from Krypton, long before the planet died. In doing so, he had unknowingly saved all the inhabitants of the planet. Superman rescued the city and spent a lot of time trying to restore it. None of the Kandorians have any superpowers though, as the glass bell jar imitated the environment of Krypton. The storyline of Kandor first appeared in 1958 in the 242nd issue of Action Comics, written by Otto Binder and illustrated by Al Plastino. Eradicator. Superman's ancestor Kal-El was kind of a race supremacist who built a device called the Eradicator to preserve the purity of Krypton from any and all alien influence. When he activated it, it subdued the alien cleric and instigated a riot. Realizing how horrible the device was, Cleric left with the Eradicator and gave it to Superman 200,000 years later when he ran into him. The device tried to turn Earth into the new Krypton and even built the Fortress of Solitude for Superman. Once Superman discovered its xenophobic origins, he shut it down, but the Eradicator returned as an energy being. He grew stronger when Superman was killed by Doomsday and created an identical body to become his own version of Superman. Eradicator's body was not perfect though. He needed to wear a special set of glasses to protect his eyes. Eventually, Superman returned, and though Eradicator was introduced as the villain, he grew to support Superman in some of his missions. Eradicator first appeared as a device in the second issue of Action Comics Annual and was created by Roger Stern and Kurt Swan. Bar-El and Lilo-El. When Superman returns from battling Bizarro in Bizarro World, he surely didn't expect to see Earth rebuilt by his own ancestors. Well, as it happened, Bar-El and Lilo-El had been legendary astronauts in Krypton and had survived the destruction of their planet as they had been away during that time. They had drifted in space for years before arriving on Earth, which had been dealing with Superman's absence. The two decided to fill the void, but their intentions were far from good. They held humans in disdain and saw them as apes. They didn't even care much for Earth, as our planet disgusted them, and all they wanted to do was turn it into the new Krypton. Is Superman the only normal member of the House of El? What's with everyone trying to change Earth into the new Krypton? Anyway, the couple did not know that they had passed through a radiation cloud that had changed the minerals in their body into deadly kryptonite that began killing them from within. Superman found a way to heal them, but they would be sent to the Phantom Zone. As they left, they apologized for their behavior and told Superman that Krypton lived through him. This astronaut couple first appeared in the 9th issue of All-Star Superman in 2007. Jor-El. In most popular versions of the story, Jor-El is a talented scientist on Krypton whose warnings about Krypton exploding are ignored by the people of his planet. Frustrated, he sends his son off to Earth on a spaceship so that at least he can survive. Once that's done, he succumbs to death along with his wife Lara. However, there are some versions of the story where Jor-El survives. In the 2011 revamp of DC, the New 52, and the 2016 DC Rebirth comics, Jor-El was whisked away from Krypton at the last moment by Dr. Manhattan and nursed back to health. Jor-El saw the atrocities of humanity and took on the identity of Mr. Oz to protect his son from adverse forces. Jor-El's first appearance was in the Superman newspaper comic strip in 1939 and was designed by writer Jerry Siegel and illustrator Joe Shuster. Most notably, Hollywood legend Marlon Brando portrayed him in the 1978 films Superman and Superman 2. Most recently, Bradley Cooper played the talented scientist in the 2025 film Superman, while Russell Crowe played him in the Man of Steel flick of 2013. Thara Ak-Var. Thara Ak-Var lived in Argo City and was the childhood friend of Kara Zor-El. During the destruction of Krypton, Zor-El built a force field around the city using technology he found after Brainiac stole the city of Kandor. Brainiac found out about it and began integrating Argo City with Kandor. He killed anyone who tried to interfere, including Thara's parents. In the shrunken city, Kandor's religious guild approached her as they believed she was the human form of their god Flamebird. She later becomes connected to Chris Kent, Zod, and Ursa's son through the Nightwing and Flamebird mythology. After Kandor is restored, she takes on the Flamebird identity and partners with Chris Kent, who uses the Nightwing name. Thara has all the standard Kryptonian powers Superman has, but due to her connection to Flamebird, she has pyrokinetic powers and an immunity to gold kryptonite. Thara is a creation of Jeff Johns and James Robinson, and she first appeared in the 681st episode of Superman, published in 2008. Brainiac. For most of his history, since his first appearance in 1958, Brainiac was not a Kryptonian. He was initially Romado, Superman's foe who went around the world with his pet monkey Coco and shrinking cities. He then became Brainiac, an alien from Colu who later turned out to be a cyborg. The creators Otto Binder and Al Plastino probably had no idea about the kind of makeover this villain would receive at the hands of Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, the creators of Superman the Animated Series. In this version voiced by Corey Burton, Brainiac is a sentient supercomputer on Krypton who dismisses Jor-El's warning about Krypton's demise, as he did not believe it was possible to save everybody. He wanted to use the time he had to save himself and escape, as he believed that the knowledge he possessed was the only thing worth saving on Krypton. He makes it out too thanks to his own cunning and goes on to be a pain in Superman's neck. Doomsday. You probably already know Doomsday as the guy who achieved the impossible by killing Superman. What you probably don't know is that Doomsday has Kryptonian roots. I might be stretching the definitions of Kryptonian and Survivor a bit, but trust me, it works. Around 250,000 years before the emergence of the humanoid Kryptonian race, Krypton was a hellish world where only the strongest creatures dominated. In this world, the alien scientist Bertrand dropped a humanoid infant as a part of his cruel study of evolution. After the baby was killed, he collected its remains and used it to clone a stronger version. He kept doing it over and over and over again till the creature was created that survived Krypton. This creature was the ultimate. He went on to become Doomsday. Doomsday's genetic memory recorded the pain of each death, and he hated life itself. So as soon as he grew up, he escaped Krypton and began a rampage, destroying any and all planets he met along the way. Because of his forced evolution, he had superhuman immunity, super fast resurrection abilities, and immense strength that could even surpass Superman. He doesn't even need to eat or breathe or sleep, and has a solid bone-like mass protecting him. Doomsday was created by Dan Jurgens for the 17th issue of Superman, the Man of Steel in 1992. He was voiced by Robin Atkin Downes in Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice. Hell. Hell believes he is a Kryptonian sent by Jor-El and Lara to bring back Krypton. He was apparently brought up by Superman's parents and sent to Earth in a prototype of the rocket that brought Kal-El here, but as his journey was far more arduous, he ended up being late. He aligns with Supergirl and asks her for help in draining the sun to travel back in time and save their planet. Superman and Supergirl stop Hell and send him back in time, where he's discovered by a young Jor-El, thus being trapped in a time loop. Hell's first appearance was in the 2012 story arc Hell on Earth, written by Scott Lobdell, Tom DeFalco, and Mike Johnson. Karsta Wor-Ul. Long before Krypton was a planet of science and reasoning, it was a military empire. But as the age of science expanded, the soldiers of the empire were forcefully retired. Some of these soldiers went AWOL and became renegades or space pirates. One of these soldiers was Karsta Wor-Ul. When she heard about Krypton's demise, she was sad, but consoled herself that the few Kryptonians that mattered were still around her. That would not last for long though, as the pirate Amalak attacked and murdered most of her friends as he harboured a grudge against Kryptonians. She fled to Earth as she knew Superman was a bigger Kryptonian target than her and planned to escape when he was attacked. But when Amalak attacked, she chose to help Superman and defeated him. Karsta Wor-Ul appeared first in the 668th issue of Superman, created by Kurt Busiek, Pete Pantazis, Rick Leonardi, and Dan Green. Mon-El. Now, Mon-El is not a Kryptonian, but he is of Kryptonian descent, which is why we are considering him in the list. Lar-Gand was from the planet of Daxam, which was colonized by Kryptonians. When he landed on Krypton, Jor-El told him to head to Earth, as Krypton was about to die. Gand landed on Earth with no memory. Kal-El, who was just Superboy at the time, assumed he was a Kryptonian as he had the same powers and gave him the name Mon-El. He found out his true identity when Mon-El was immune to kryptonite but was weakened by lead because Eradicator manipulated the genes of the Daxamites. Mon-El was portrayed by Chris Wood in the show Supergirl and first appeared in the 89th issue of Superboy in 1961. Zor-El. Zor-El, Kara Zor-El's father, was a skilled scientist and one of the very few people who believed Jor-El's warning about Krypton's destruction. He put up barriers around their hometown, Argo City, so when Krypton blew up, Argo City was blown into space safely. Unfortunately, a meteor storm punctured the shields of the city, and Zor-El quickly sent Kara to Earth. Kara later found out that her parents had teleported to the Survival Zone, a parallel dimension similar to the Phantom Zone, just before Argo City exploded. In one version, Zor-El survived as Brainiac shrunk Argo and stored it with Kandor. In another version, Zor-El was turned into a cyborg by Brainiac and programmed to serve him. Zor-El was created by Otto Binder and Al Plastino and first appeared in 1959 in the 252nd issue of Action Comics. Val-Zod. In the alternate universe of Earth 2, Val-Zod was one of the few Kryptonians who escaped the destruction of Krypton along with Kara and Kal-El, thanks to Jor-El and Lara. On Earth 2, Val-Zod was discovered by businessman Terry Sloan, who isolated him from the rest of the world. Eventually, Lois Lane found Val and freed him. When Superman was brainwashed and went on a rampage, it was up to Val-Zod to save the world from Superman. After Superman died, he became the new Superman of Earth 2. Also, Val-Zod first appeared in the 19th issue of Earth 2. Dev-M. Dev-M was a juvenile delinquent who believed Jor-El's warning and placed him in an orbiting space capsule to survive Krypton's destruction. The planet's explosion propelled his capsule and he found himself on Earth. Once there, he imprisoned Superboy and took his place to discredit him. Eventually, he freed Superboy and time-travelled to the 30th century to settle down. It is later revealed that Dev-M joined and reformed the Interstellar Counterintelligence Corps in the 30th century. He's even offered a place in the Legion of Superheroes, but Dev-M declines. A creation of Jerry Siegel and George Papp, Dev-M appeared in the 287th issue of Adventure Comics in 1961. The Phantom Zone. The Phantom Zone was a pocket universe discovered by Jor-El and used by the Kryptonians as a humane method of imprisonment for their criminals. The Phantom Zone defies all laws of physics, and time moves differently there. The inmates don't need food to survive and can't interact with the universe, but can observe from within. All the inmates of the Phantom Zone survived Krypton's destruction and harboured a grudge against Superman as his father was the reason for their suffering. Since there were a lot of survivors here, I will not be able to give you complete info on all of them, but for your information, here are the surviving prisoners. Ar-Ul, Balgra, Black Dew, Charmel, Zeda, Gornu, Gaz-Ur, Gramo, Kurdol, Ornzu, Pyron, Rosem, Raz-Krom, Shaila Kor-On, Talvar, Tragob, Vax-Nor, Vorb-Un, Vor-Kill, Zan-Em, and Zomar. General Zod. One of the most iconic villains of Superman is Dru-Zod, more popularly known as General Zod. You can almost hear his memorable line, "Kneel before Zod." In the Silver Age, the megalomaniac Kryptonian used to be a leader in Krypton's military. He was sentenced to 40 years in the Phantom Zone after he tried to conquer Krypton. Superman found out he had served his time and freed him, but the Kryptonian immediately tried to conquer Earth, forcing Superman to put him back in the Phantom Zone. Zod first appeared in the 283rd issue of Adventure Comics in 1961. He was created by Robert Bernstein and initially designed by George Papp with a bold head and clean-shaven look. Zod's look eventually changed to include thick black hair and a goatee, thanks to Terrence Stamp's portrayal of the character in the 1978 film Superman and the 1980 film Superman 2. Michael Shannon also portrayed the character in the DCEU. Faora. Thara Ak-Var was introduced in the 471st issue of Action Comics, created by Cary Bates and Kurt Swan. Faora hated men and started a secret concentration camp where she tortured and killed 23 men. She was convicted and sentenced to 300 years of imprisonment in the Phantom Zone, where she met General Zod and Jax-Ur. She partnered up with them to plot against Superman. She is sometimes depicted as the wife or lover of General Zod. The Phantom Zone did nothing to curb her homicidal tendencies, as after escaping the prison dimension, she killed a French man who was attracted to her. She's an expert in Horo Kanu, the Kryptonian martial art, and has the ability to generate mental lightning at times. She was first portrayed by Erica Durance and Sharon Taylor in the series Smallville, and Anch Trow portrayed her in the DCU films. Ursa. Ursa is a character created for the 1978 film Superman by writer Mario Puzo and played by Sarah Douglas. General Zod's right-hand woman, Ursa was sentenced to life imprisonment, alongside General Zod and Non, by prosecutor Jor-El for their attempt at a coup against the Kryptonian government. She is a ruthless murderer who likes collecting the badges of the military and law officers she kills. The three criminals escaped the Phantom Zone when Superman detonated a powerful explosive in space and accidentally shattered the Phantom Zone. Superman and Lois Lane managed to trap them in the depths of the Fortress of Solitude. In the director's cut, Ursa, along with Zod and his forces, are re-imprisoned in the Phantom Zone by Superman. Ursa is very similar to Faora, and the latter was probably inspired by Ursa, as Faora was introduced while the films were in production. She was properly introduced to the comic book canon in 2007 through the 845th issue of Action Comics, in the Last Son arc by Richard Donner and Jeff Johns. Non. Just like Ursa, Non too is a creation of Mario Puzo for the Superman films and was portrayed by Jack O'Halloran. Non is General Zod's muscle. He is stupid, incapable of speaking, and incredibly powerful. I already told you about the life imprisonment verdict, the jailbreak, and the re-imprisonment in the films. In 2006, the director of the 70s Superman films, Richard Donner, began writing Action Comics with Jeff Johns. In this story, Non received a backstory. He used to be a member of the Kryptonian Council and a friend of Jor-El. The Science Council kidnapped him and lobotomized him for leading a separatist movement, because of which he became a non-verbal angry brute and nothing more than General Zod's enforcer. He still retains a tiny part of his original mind, because of which he is very careful, gentle and kind while dealing with children. Jax-Ur. Krypton was a planet of scientists, so you have to expect at least a mad scientist or two in the Phantom Zone. Enter Jax-Ur, the criminally deviant scientist who began experimenting with nuclear warheads so that he could build a nuclear arsenal and take Krypton under his control. During one such experiment, he blew up the moon of Krypton, Weather, which had a population of 500 people. For this, he was sentenced to eternal imprisonment. This mass murderer calls himself the worst criminal in the Phantom Zone and has his eyes on world domination. He has escaped the Phantom Zone a couple of times, but he ends up right back there, having been defeated by Superman or Mon-El. Jax-Ur first appeared in 1961 in the 289th issue of Adventure Comics, and was the brainchild of Otto Binder and George Papp. His first live-action appearance was in Man of Steel, played by Mackenzie Gray. Marla. Another evil scientist in the mix, Marla used to be a respected member of the Scientist Council. Marla invented a device that could remove all moisture from the planet, and threatened to use it if the entire control of Krypton was not handed over to him and his brothers Yuban and Kizo. Jor-El stopped him and placed them in suspended animation in outer space, as an alternative to the death penalty. A gender-flipped version of the character appeared in Superman the Animated Series. This version was not a scientist, but a lieutenant of High General Jax-Ur who staged an unsuccessful coup. Marla was imprisoned at Phantom Zone with Jax-Ur. Superman freed her when he found out she completed her sentence, but put her back there after she freed Jax-Ur and tried to conquer Earth. I mean, these villains never learn, but it looks like Superman doesn't learn quickly either. How many more attempts at Earth does he need to understand that freeing people from the Phantom Zone is a bad idea? Zardu. Zardu, or the Phantom King, was a Kryptonian scientist and researcher who was working on improving suspended animation. His techniques, however, were super unethical, and the Kryptonian Science Council put a stop to his research and sentenced him to be the first inmate of the Phantom Zone. Zardu was a sociopath who did not take kindly to people messing with him, so he swore revenge on Jor-El and his entire family. Years after Krypton's explosion, Zardu managed to temporarily reactivate the Phantom Zone projector and swapped places with Kal-El, but his plans were effectively thwarted and he ended up right back in the Phantom Zone. The first appearance of Zardu was in the 283rd issue of Action Comics. This sociopathic researcher was conceived by Robert Bernstein and George Papp. La-On. Not everyone imprisoned in the Phantom Zone deserved to be there. A prime example of this is La-On. A citizen of Argo City, La-On turned into a vicious werewolf from red kryptonite exposure. Unable to find a cure, Zor-El quarantined him in the Phantom Zone to protect the citizens of Argo City from him. Years later, the Department of Extra Normal Operations accidentally released him while testing a Phantom Drive engine. Exposed to the Earth's moon, he turned into a wolf and began rampaging. Supergirl contained him, but was unable to help him as his DNA had been so mangled that he was not even Kryptonian anymore. This character was developed by Dennis O'Neil and Murphy Anderson and first appeared in 1979. Nam-Ek. First appearing in the 282nd issue of Superman in 1974, Nam-Ek was a scientist obsessed with immortality. He killed 2 Rondors, native beasts of Krypton, to use the healing powers of their horns to create an elixir of immortality. The serum, however, turned him into a humanoid Rondor. In the DCEU, Nam-Ek was a war criminal, a member of the Sword of Ra, and one of General Zod's strongest soldiers. With Zod, he tried to bring about a terraformation apocalypse to establish Krypton on Earth, but was stopped by Lois Lane and the United States Armed Forces. Michael Justice played him in Man of Steel. Quex-Ul. Quex-Ul was thrown to the Phantom Zone for the same reason as Nam-Ek, for killing Rondors. Quex-Ul was a poacher who wanted to use their healing horns to make a neat profit for himself. He served his time in the zone and was released by Superman by Quex-Ul. But Quex-Ul was not going to live his life crime-free. He immediately schemed and set a gold kryptonite trap for Superman. When Superman found out that Quex-Ul had not killed any Rondors and had been brainwashed into accepting the blame for it by the real killer, Rog-R, Quex-Ul threw himself into the trap to save Superman. Because of his selfless deed, he lost his powers and memories. This poor scapegoat was created by Edmund Hamilton and Kurt Swan and first appeared in 1962 in 157th issue of Superman. Gordon Alexander played him in the sci-fi series Krypton. Kru-El. A cousin of Jor-El, Kru-El was created by Leo Dorfman and Jim Mooney and first appeared in the 297th issue of Action Comics, published in 1963. Kru-El was scientifically and technologically adept like his more studious cousin Jor-El, but was cruel. He took up weapon designing as an adult and was arrested for developing an arsenal of highly powerful forbidden weapons. He was sentenced to 35 Kryptonian sun cycles in the Phantom Zone, which comes to around 47.95 Earth years. In the universe of Earth 1, Kru-El was sentenced to 35 years in prison for the same crime. This version grew up terrorizing his cousin Jor-El and turned his attention to harassing his son after Jor-El passed. Val-Ty. Val-Ty, created by James Robinson, Greg Rucka, and Pete Woods, first appeared in 2009 in the 4th issue of Superman, World of New Krypton. Most of his lore comes from New Earth. Val-Ty was a sociopath who did not hesitate to do anything as long as he was benefiting. He fought the Green Lantern Tomar-Re and destroyed Zan City to escape him. He was imprisoned in the Phantom Zone for his crimes, but was provided amnesty by General Zod when he formed New Krypton. Val stayed on New Krypton and went rogue. Kal-El's Red Shard eventually captured him and returned into the Phantom Zone. Car-Vex. Car-Vex was a Kryptonian criminal in the Phantom Zone who was later employed by General Zod to be a sleeper agent on Earth. She used the alias Officer Ramundi of the Science Police to infiltrate Project 7734. She was played by Samantha Wynn in the Man of Steel film, where her lore was a bit retconned. In this flick, she was a fanatical soldier under General Zod, and helped him stage a coup to extinguish all unworthy bloodlines on Krypton. She was arrested alongside Zod's forces, and years later she was part of Zod's crew when he attacked Earth. And just like the rest of his crew, he was sucked back into the Phantom Zone thanks to Lois Lane in the United States. Tor-An. The life of Tor-An, played by Richard Cetrone in the DCU, was pretty similar to Car-Vex. Was a loyal soldier to General Zod, helped him stage a coup, was arrested with him in the Phantom Zone, tried to establish Krypton on Earth, and sucked back into the Phantom Zone. You know, the usual highlights. His comic counterpart, however, is different and, dare I say, unique. Tor-An was sentenced to the Phantom Zone for transferring the minds of a Kryptonian family into the bodies of monsters. Years later, he convinced a group of Phantom Zone prisoners to combine their mental powers into tricking Supergirl so that she would open a small rift in the zone. Once that happened, Tor-An waltzed out and bamboozled Supergirl into marrying him. He began gloating about how disgraced Supergirl would be, and within moments realized he was the one bamboozled by Supergirl. He was captured and sent back to the zone. Created by Leo Dorfman and Jim Mooney, Tor-An first appeared in the 307th issue of Action Comics in 1963. Az-Rel and Nadira Vadim. The Bonnie and Clyde of Krypton, Az-Rel and Nadira Vadim are a petty criminal couple from Bokos. Az-Rel had pyrokinetic powers, while Nadira had psychokinetic abilities. Together, they terrorized Ur-Kol, the oldest city of Krypton. Upon capture, they were sentenced to 15 Kryptonian sun cycles in the Phantom Zone, which comes to around 20.5 Earth years. They escaped when Quex-Ul built and activated a crude Phantom Zone projector. Unfortunately, Jor-El exposed Nadira to green kryptonite and killed her. In her last moments, she telekinetically hurt Az-Rel and triggered his powers, reducing him to ashes within moments. In post-crisis storylines, the couple was enlisted by Ursa to be sleeper agents on Earth. They were created by Greg Rucka, Sidney Tells, and Diego Olmos, and first appeared in 2009 in the 877th issue of Action Comics. These were all the known Kryptonians who survived Krypton's destruction. Definitely defies Superman's title as Krypton's last son, doesn't it? Nearly all these characters have more lore, more alternate versions, and different origin stories depending on their continuity. So go hit the comics to check out the lore I couldn't include here. Which one of these Kryptonians is your favourite? Are you going to choose the obvious and say Superman, and do you have a different interesting answer? Let me know in the comments below, and if you liked the video, tap on that thumbs up and subscribe. We will soon be back with more awesome stuff, but until then, goodbye.